Hi, this is Meeple Lady.
Hi there, my name is Federico Latini from Italy.
Voice memo from Tony.
I pledge for Game for Doomsday because content is king and we must provide what we can to cheer and to sustain the people the content we love.
I support 5 Games for Doomsday because it's smart, thoughtful, and unlike anything else I listen to out there.
I support 5 Games for Doomsday because Ben Maddox has a lovely voice and he always reminds me that my days are numbered and that judgment is coming. So what else am I going to spend my money on? It's the end of the world as we know it, but with 5 Games for Doomsday, I feel fine.
And really, who doesn't love listening to that sweet, sweet accent?
You can support this show by going to patreon.com/5G4D. Out of the street corners they scream. You knew it was coming. You've been waiting for this for months. Rumour hardened into fear and now they scream at you. The sirens, their hysterical wail tearing through the white noise of the city. And you run. You run to pick up those things that can never be replaced. A picture of them in the days when they still loved you. Your mother's wedding ring. And then you turn to your shelf of games. You only have room for 5. 5 Games for Doomsday. 5 Games for Doomsday is a show in which board game personalities are thrust into a cabin in the woods to outrun an oncoming disaster, but can only take 5 of their games with them. But which will they choose? The only fitting word to describe my guest this week is legend. He has won every award going and has sold millions of copies of the over 600 games he's designed. His classic titles include Tigris and Euphrates, Battle Line, and The Lord of the Rings, which has been credited as the first instance of the modern cooperative game. My guest this week is Reiner Knizia. Reiner, thank you very much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, to begin, how difficult was it for you to choose the 5 games that you've chosen today?
Well, I have made it easy for me. I did not make a big science and exercise out of it. I simply took a spontaneous decision, said, what would I take? And it was as you know, if you have a situation where you have to evacuate very quickly, you don't have time to make a big analysis. So I took a very quick decision, and that's what came out.
So what was the decision criterion that you made? Was it practicality, sentimentality, something like that?
I don't think it was sentimental. I don't think it was practical. I was not restricted by any volume, so it didn't mean that I had to take small games, even though some of them are quite small. It was just simply, what do I think in the long run would provide me with the most fun and give me the most flexibility to enjoy games.
So how do you think you'd cope in the cabin? Are you a practical person? Can you chop wood?
I fear I'm a little bit of an unpractical person. I don't think I would survive very long. On the other hand, I'm also not a very demanding person. I don't need very much to be happy and to live. And so as long as it's cozy warm, as long as there's some food, I'm quite happy to stay months over months by myself. I have enough to do. I have enough to think about. I have enough to create. So that's fine with me. If it goes into going out into the cold and fighting the bears, I don't think I'm the right person.
So you were born in Ulm, and not many people may know this, but Ulm is the birthplace of Einstein. And you went to Ulm University. Was Einstein a figure that hung over Ulm and when you were studying?
Actually, he did not. I mean, I grew up in the vicinity of Ulm in the little town of Illertissen, but Ulm was very close. And yes, as you say, I went to university in Ulm. Ulm has the biggest steeple tower in the world, so there's some other fame than Einstein. But of course, there is Einstein, there is the image, there is the knowledge, there is the presence of Einstein in Ulm. However, it's not shadowing you. I mean, unfortunately, the Einstein family did not agree that we could call the university, the Einstein University. So it is now just the University of Ulm. And I even got closer because I started studying physics and then later or at the same time meandered over to mathematics and then stayed with mathematics, which for me was the more exact and precise science, which I loved.
And so And so, what was it about mathematics that inspired you? I mean, I went to school and I was terrible at maths, and my parents were like, "Oh yeah, we hate it too." So what was it that inspired you?
I think I always had an easy time with mathematics. I enjoyed doing it. I very early looked into probability theories and statistics, which fascinated me. And so it was a natural thing. I was very good in sciences. I think I am a scientist from background and from nature. And so I always knew if I wanted to go into science, I needed mathematics. That's why I essentially started to study both mathematics and physics. Physics was my favorite subject at school. I did a lot of experiments and worked and used all the facilities at school to just further my excitement and my knowledge about it. When I got to university, there's actually a nice story. At school, I never understood one of the specific aspects of relativity theory. And unfortunately, my teachers, who were very good and very enthusiastic, could not explain that to me either. And so So finally, at university, this is going to be the moment where I get the insights. And you actually cover the relativity theory already in the end of the first semester in mechanical theory. And so I thought, this is all fine. Unfortunately, when it was covered in the lectures, I still did not understand that aspect. So we had tutors, so I went to the tutor and said, okay, now explain this to me. Of course, I had worked on this and got my own thinking system about this problem, so I actually managed to confuse the tutor. Therefore, and I see that really in front of my eyes as I explain it and as I tell it, we said, okay, let's go to the professor's assistant and let's sort this once and for good. And do you know what has happened? We went there, and after 15 minutes, I had also confused the assistant. And as university is a not a small university, but a very personal university, actually we just said, let's go to the professor and let's get it, so to speak, from the capacity from the person who knows. And we sat there in his room, and after 20 minutes, I had also him confused. And it's a true story, and this left a great disappointment in me about physics. And essentially, it was one of the main decision points why I said, no, if we can't do that, then I need to understand more mathematics to really teach myself and need to go into this. And so essentially I meandered away from physics and really got into mathematics to understand the deep theories, because that in the end is the basis for all these hard sciences.
So it's become something of a social meme that mathematics is opaque and it's difficult and it's no fun. So what would you say to these people, these people like me who say, I can't understand mathematics. Why is mathematics important? What is it good for?
Well, first of all, I believe if you think you can't, you can't. And if you think you can, you can. And I personally believe mathematics is very exciting. Mathematics is very interesting. It has a lot of amazing aspects. You don't have to be able to do enormously big formulas and enormously big calculations. There are enough very good and written by very good people, very good books and essays about mathematics for everybody. And it's probably the better way to get an understanding of what mathematics can do than rather to study the formulas. Of course, if you want to go deeper, and a lot of the sciences, if you look today at all the big data, the algorithms which are used to know everything about our lives and sell us even more things, essentially also all the software is based on models. And mathematics teaches you lots of aspects. It teaches you probability, so understand risks, probabilities, uncertainties. The world is full of this. Mathematics is all about modeling systems, making simple models of them, like games sometimes. And so I think that's important for the world. And as we are more and more getting dominated by the sciences, by the data, by the information which rules the world, I think the more an understanding you have for it, the better you understand the world and the better you can, so to speak, navigate the world. But mathematics, I say it again, mathematics is not, for me, this, you have to do it. And it should not be for anybody. You have to like it. So it's not just you have to do mathematics, you have to like it. And I believe if you find the right entry points, you can love and like mathematics. And if you speak to mathematicians, they can tell you, they can bring you up to very interesting facts in mathematics, even if you have no real background. It's just, if you want, you can. If you don't want, you can't. So I would suggest don't tell yourself that you're not good at math, and don't tell yourself it's hard. Maybe it was hard at school, but school is not mathematics.
So going on to your first choice, well, I guess it's pretty lucky that I'm not super strict on this, because this might be considered a bit of a cheat, but you've chosen a packet of playing cards. Why did you choose this? I
believe the playing cards are the most flexible and the most elementary playing tools we can have, which have ever been invented. And if I think, where can I get most of fun, most of excitement, most of flexibility, also most of idea for new games, because I'm cheating in another way as well. I'm not just taking these 5 games. As soon as I'm there, I'll invent many more games. So I'll have lots again. And the best basis for this is a deck of cards.
And so last year you published a trick-taking game, and obviously you like traditional card games, but do you think traditional card games are denigrated by the hobby gamer?
It's a difficult question, because what does it mean being undervalued, being overvalued? It is seeing what the world wants to play, what people get enthusiastic about it, and accepting it. And there is a reason if people play more of this type and less of the other type. And I think we are able to make to create a lot of exciting card games as well. Cards are, if you look at the industry, the completely new industry which was created through the collectible card games and now the deck building games, there is a lot of potential in these cards, in this approach to games. And they have to prove themselves. So you can't stand there and say, well, they are undervalued. Why are they undervalued? If you think they have more worth, then do something about it and create something which people will love and will do. So it's essentially originates in itself. If there's nothing new, people will move away from it. I think there can be a lot of new things. Of course, you sometimes, just to put a little bit of a caveat on it, sometimes you go against prejudices. And one of the prejudices or experiences in the publisher world is that it's very hard to position a new trick-taking game.
So when we think of traditional card games, we think of old people in bridge clubs or in smoky bars, do you think that these traditional card games will be replaced by your Dominions, your deck builders, your modern trick-taking games, and they'll be the games played in smoky bars when I'm a lot older than I am?
I don't know. You can also say poker and you don't think of old people. And I think there are lots of young people who also play the traditional games. I don't think we will have the new game. It's not about, look, these are the old games and they will be identically replaced by the new games and then they will be played in the same fashion. It's just a different game. No, the whole world will change, and cards you may actually play a virtual card game, so the environment might change in the future. It is really about what excites you, what is still relevant. And at the moment, a lot of these classic card games are relevant because a lot of people play them, as is chess, for example. If you wanted to publish chess today, you would have no chance. But it's relevant because there are world championships, there are lots of people who play it, and therefore it has relevance in the world. And it depends what relevance new games will have. I don't think that the many new trick-taking card games and other card games that come out can actually reach that relevance, apart from maybe a few exceptions, because you have too much competition. You have too little time to establish yourself as a card game. And so it will probably be something else, something much bigger, which reaches the critical mass to be then relevant for the people because everybody wants to play them with you.
So when did you first become acquainted with gaming? Did you game as a child, for instance?
Absolutely. I have played games as long as I can think. I have, as we said, I grew up in a very small town, Illertissen, and there was no game shop. The barber was the only one who sold some games. And he didn't have a big collection and I didn't have much pocket money. So because of my enthusiasm at that time for gaming themes, I very quickly ended up in building my own games around themes, racing themes, whatever I wanted to imagine as a 10-year-old, and to build them. They got sometimes very complex, and I remember some of my friends where we played very detailed games with needles, where we had little flags glued to them, and we had radiuses, how far you could move, and these games were all for us. These games were not for publication, they were for our fun, for my fun. I enjoyed as much designing them as playing them as it is still today. And so it has always been part of my life to play games, to think about games, to design games, to keep my eyes open what can be a game.
So the first games that you designed that really came into notice were the play-by-mail games in the 1980s, is that correct?
The first game who saw the public light were the play-by-mail game. That is correct. Of course, I at that time had a very big repertoire of games I had created and which we played among friends, but which had never been published and therefore not been seen. So to the outside, yes, these were the first appearances.
So these were games called Post Pillion and Bretton Woods. So what were they, and what were the challenges in designing a play-by-mail game as opposed to a game on a tabletop?
I have always, until today, been fascinated by taking on new challenges. And when I saw the play-by-mail games, what is play-by-mail? Play-by-mail, I guess one has to explain it today because it was common knowledge in the former times. But it means you play a game, but you're not sitting around a table. You actually think about your move, and then you send the move in to the game master, the editor, and he will then run through the moves, make the moves, calculate or state the results, and put them in a little magazine, which you just subscribe to. And then after 2 or 3 weeks after you made your move, you would receive the magazine and you would see the new situation, and then you would plan your new move, hand it in within a week, and then after 3 weeks you get the result. A very fast, dynamic way of playing in today's networked world, but that was it was. And when I looked at this, and that's where the challenge came in and my interest came in, when I looked at this, I saw that people just play standard board games, and I thought, my God, this is too slow. And also then you got this NR, no move received, NMR. So then somebody didn't hand in his move, and then the whole game was halted and destroyed, and it didn't work. And so I said, no, we need to do that differently. There is the opportunity to get lots of people on the table. I couldn't speed it up. Networks weren't there at the time. But I said, I want to design games where any number of players can participate, and where it doesn't matter if you hand in your turn or not, because there are markets, there are situations, it's your own loss if you don't participate in that. And so I created a Formula One racing game, for example, and in this game you could either become a builder of engines, or you could become a builder of the racing cars. You could actually train, hire, and be the manager of drivers. You could participate in races. You could develop good tires. And it was a big marketplace where people could either buy their things of different generations and different qualities and put together their engines. So there were many different rules, many different roles as well. But if one person just didn't participate in the race, it didn't participate. It didn't mean. And we had sometimes 40, 50, 60 people playing in these games, and they created a completely new experience, which you cannot recreate when you sit on a board game around the table. And that fascinated me, and that was the whole magazine full of such games. Any number of players, no move received, doesn't matter, and a lot of interaction. Still, you have to wait 2 or 3 weeks. I actually had a turnaround cycle of 2 weeks because I said a monthly edition, as the usual magazines were, is too long. And that's how I started publishing this magazine, the Postillon.
And so when did you think designing games would be a viable career, that you could actually make a living from it?
There's at least a 2-stage process here. The first was the realization, shouldn't I try to get published? I had, in my infinite ignorance, of course, taken a few games earlier and sent them to Ravensburger, in Germany, the name for games. And of course, I got nice letters that thank you for the enthusiasm and so on. It's almost there. But of course, it's a marketing campaign because they say, you send us a lot of rubbish, which was true. And we can never publish it, but they didn't say it in these ways. So I don't count this as serious trying to get published. When I made this series, went to the fairs, talked to the publishers, I was actually lucky because I was successful right from the start. I talked to Hans im Glück, which they were a small publisher at that time. And of course, I was a nobody. And I talked to Hexa Games at that time. And they both immediately took one of my games. And I talked to the Hubenbubel, big book publishing company, and said, look, I have so many games. Why don't we put these new games into a book and essentially just use standard materials like cards and dice and make lots of different games out of it. And they agreed to it. So suddenly, in 1990, I had 2 games and 1 book appearing at the same time, and it just took off from there. And as a side remark, the book, New Tactic Games with Cards and Dice, is just going to be published this year again in the first English edition ever to happen. But I said it's a 2-stage process. So this was the first stage, to be ambitious, to get published. And I was lucky enough to relatively early win the German Game Prize, which made me more visible and opened more doors. The decision actually to give up my job, and at that time I was a board member and director of a big mortgage company in the UK, responsible for £1 billion of new business every year. So I had an exciting and demanding management job. And also on the other side, I saw that the games became more and more successful. And I came to the conclusion I cannot do both. So I had to take the decision. It was a decision I considered for quite some time, probably 18 months to 2 years, until I said, okay, I will jump, I'll do this. And I have never regretted it ever since.
So, again, your second choice is quite a general thing. It's a set of dice, but it's also accompanied by your game Decathlon, which is a free game on your website. Why did you choose this?
After the cards, I think dice are also a very important instrument for games. You can do a lot of things. It's not just roll the die and move your figure. We have seen many of these. There are some good ones there and some classic ones there. I know everybody has one name in mind, Monopoly. But there are many other things you can do with dice. And I'm still very fond of my Decathlon game. And it's a type of game, almost like the Postillon game, the play-by-mail games. You can't really market them in the usual way. And Decathlon is something I said, well, why should I try to press it in somewhere in there? It doesn't really fit. So I put it on my website and just offer it for free so that people can enjoy it. And you just go through the 10 different disciplines of the Decathlon, and I think it's very nicely simulated by how you act in the individual disciplines to get a good result. And it's all about points. I mean, I think I'm a very much point and result driven person and competitive person. So for me, it's playing against the others, but I can also play this by myself. I can just try to get a very high score. How much do I risk? I have only so many tries. Do I really put a lot of force in it? And then I might get a false try. Yes. And it's for me a very nice implementation of what you can do with dice. And so I said, well, if I just take standard dice, I might as well take Decathlon, and I will have the game and I have the dice. But the main purpose was to get the dice.
So dice are the symbol of randomness in games. In fact, some people are quite sniffy about them, and some publishers even brag that they don't use dice. But what function does randomness have in games? Why shouldn't all games just be perfect information games?
I think this is very important to have randomness in the game, because if you have perfect information, you feel almost obliged. If I want to play well, then I need to think a lot. And it may be fine if you think a lot. But if all your opponents think a lot as well, the game becomes very slow. And this is fine for some types of games like chess. You know, when you play a game of chess, you know what you let yourself in for. And this is perfectly fine. And this is this type of game. But I do not only like chess type games. And as soon as you have a adequate portion of luck in the game, then this goes away. It doesn't mean that my destiny is not in my control. It just means that I have to react to ever new circumstances, and in these circumstances, take the right decisions. And it can very well be that the dice are not just for me, but I have games where you roll the dice in the middle and they are relevant for everybody. And so the situation is always the same, but the challenge for us is always different. And therefore, it's not the luck, it is more the change of the situation, the variety, which makes the game much more relaxed, much more fun. And it's this sort of game where I can play intuitively. Of course, I'm a mathematician. My intuitiveness may be a bit deeper than somebody else's intuitiveness. Well, learn mathematics. And this is, for me, the aspect which in the end also results in, okay, I have lost, I was unlucky, and okay, I won, I was the better player, I had the better strategy. So there's a way out for everybody. And it is just so much more fun and so much more variety. If I play chess, and I have very high regards for chess, it's always the same situation until the other one makes a move. So it's only the opponent, whereas the game itself stays constant. If we use some random aspects, the game changes itself.
So you're a very prolific designer. As I said in the intro, you've designed over 600 games. So I'm going to be awkward now and ask you to pick out some favourite children. What are some of the favourite games that you've designed?
Yeah, you must have read some of my interviews, because when people ask me this question, and they often do, I always talk about my children, as you just said. It's pick your favorite child. And even if you had one, would you announce it? But it's not about political correctness. It is, I have some favorites, and I have some, so to speak, favorite genres. For example, if I look at Through the Desert, which was just republished last year in the classic Euro Classic series with Fantasy Flight, now Asmodee. If I look at this game, then this expresses to me a certain type and style of game which I absolutely love. You know, if I look at my life, I see that my life is overfilled with exciting things, and I just have to take very painful choices almost every day. What of these great things can I do, and what do I have to say no to? And I want to find the same situation and the same feeling in the game. I don't want to sit there and say, okay, what is the best verse move? And I can't really do something. No, I don't want to sit there. I want to sit there in a way of biting my fingernails and say, oh God, it's happening there, it's burning there. I need to do this before the other one does it. And I want to do 12 moves, but I can only do 2. And I think Through the Desert is one type of game where this happens. It's not the only type, but that's more the genre which is represented there. I like the challenge of, so to speak, the interchange through auctions or through biddings. So I'm fascinated by the mechanisms in Ra, for example, because Ra you're not only bidding for the valuable things you want to have, but at the same time, you are getting bidding power for the future. And so it is a completely different ballgame when you just suddenly say, okay, I'm happy with getting low values, but I will be very strong in the future. Or it's like playing all your high trumps first or low trumps first, but it's in a bidding game where it's very natural that suddenly bidding means something very different, because you build the future by investing in the future, or you try to take the values out, but then you will be weak in the future. So, but there are many different aspects. It's modern art. Modern art fascinates me. It's also a bidding game, but modern art fascinates me almost. I didn't create it like this, but it fascinates me by the many different versions and editions we are getting. The latest one now is from Cool Minis or Not, and we actually had an exhibition just of all the different modern art games, because they're all local editions with local art, with local artists, and it has lots of cards in there, and you can actually fill half a museum, I think, with all these exposés of just this one game. So I think what I want to say is there are many different fascinating aspects which highlight games to me, but there's not one criteria in saying this is my favorite game. So I have mentioned a few. I could mention El Dorado, but I guess we come to El Dorado soon, which again has some fascination to me. So it's also not right to say that, as the last sentence of this question, it's not right to point out some of the games and say these are my favorites, because I have a number of games in my archive which look a little bit pale. And when I take them out and play them again, I actually feel what's unique about this child and why I loved it, why I designed it. And it grows on me again. And I say, okay, yes, I understand. This is nice about it. And I love it, even though it hasn't maybe seen 20, 30 editions. Maybe there was only one edition, but it still has its own personality. And so it's completely, I think it's unfair to only pick your favorite child and then kind of set back the others. They have all their right to live, and different people like different games, and that's how it should be.
You've designed a lot of games. I mean, how far in the process is it when you think this is a viable design? I guess what I'm trying to say is, what is your hit rate from ideas to playable games?
The answer is both, very low and very high. I think it is almost the curse of having so many ideas. So the question is not, where do I get my next good idea from? The question is more, I have so many ideas, where do I find the time to feed them, to develop them? Having a good idea can happen very quickly, and you can have a nice workshop, and you can have a nice discussion, nice idea to develop a first understanding how that could look like. But then comes months of work, of testing, of fine-tuning to turn this game into a perfect product. And then you can give it to the publisher, and then the publisher decides if this perfect product is also perfect for them or doesn't fit the range, or if they have a different type of liking and therefore it's not the game for them. So it's a process which is a very long process. And in the beginning, I think that is very important. You need to be very, very rigid and say, okay, that's a nice idea, that's a nice idea. And very, very quickly kill those ideas which haven't got the right power to be really successful. So with this respect, in the first hour, most of the ideas die. Once we get into it, and once we have a first prototype, and we survive the first play, and the prototype is usually not complete, but it's just a feasibility study of do these specific innovative core aspects of the game work? And once we have this, and I think yes, then I believe the hit rate is very, very high, probably 98%.
So when I told my friends I was interviewing Reiner Knizia, a lot of them said to me, oh, did you know that he doesn't play other people's games? Is this true, or is this just a vicious rumor?
It is almost true, but one needs to understand why there is truth to it. I'm sitting in my studio at the moment, in the design part of the studio, and I have my almost famous 60 drawers here. And each of the drawers is filled with a new design. And all these drawers are shouting at me to be fed and to be developed. And then I'm cheating, and then I have a few more in the shelves and around here. And so whenever there is an opportunity to play, and essentially we are playing every day, whenever there's an opportunity to play, then these games and the curiosity about, I've spent time developing it further, let's see how that works. And with the other group, they had some problems on this side, let's see how it works with the new group. And so it is just a natural process that the new designs always come to the foreground. And just by necessity, that leaves me very little time to play other people's games. So it's not I don't want to play other people's games. It is just, that's how it happens. But I have a wide circle of playtesters. And of course, these playtesters know a lot of other games. They play games behind my back, other people's games. And I mean that jokingly. So they would come and say, there's a great game. There's a new game. There's something you should see. And then they bring it, and then they put it on the table and we play it. So that is happening. Or we do specific research, and I'm saying I'm working maybe on a legacy game. So let's see what other people have done, because I want to do something radically new. So these things happen, but it's not that I have twice a week a social evening where we just play other people's games. Just no time for that. And it has an advantage to say that as well. I have a principle that I do not look at unpublished materials because, your subconscious takes something up, or if you play games which are already published, then you know a solution and for a problem. And when you design a game, you have many, many problems, challenges to solve, many, many situations to resolve. What do I do in a tie situation? What do I do in this case? What do I do if somebody is squeezed out of money? And it's very specific questions, but usually with general answers. And if you know the answer of somebody else, it is much, much harder to think of your own independent answer, because the brain is there and it doesn't go anywhere else. But if you haven't got a solution yet, it's much easier to think of a solution. And this is usually a more innovative one, because you haven't seen somebody else's and inadvertently, unwillingly followed the other one.
So your next game is Camino. And I did a bit of research on Camino, and it sold an awful lot of units. Is this the game that really cemented you as being able to be a designer who can live independently from this work?
You are right. It is a very successful game for us. It has become kind of a cult game, and there are lots of sales. But no, this came later in my career. It has been a build-up, and I have some strong classic titles. We got very strongly into hybrid games. Where Was, or Who Was It, who won also the Game of the Year and some other rewards, is the one which Ravensburger has published 10 years ago. We'll have a Jubilee edition this year. And this is the one, if you look at the financials and at the commercial side, is the most successful one for us. But success can be measured in many different ways. And I'm certainly absolutely delighted about Camino, how it does, how it speaks to people, and how people get just drawn into the game. It's a little dice game.
And so why are you taking this with you?
Well, I wasn't quite sure if I would be sitting alone in my cabin or if I would have other players. And so I thought, this is a game where I could probably do a solitaire variant for, or where there is also a nice iPhone, Android implementation where I could just play it on these devices. Of course, in the cabin, I probably wouldn't have any power, so that was a spontaneous idea which probably failed.
So what's your recollection of designing it? I mean, it's a little game. How long did it take?
It is an interesting and good question, particularly in this case, because my working title originally was Lucky Strike. I had a horseshoe where you actually rolled the dice in so that they fell nicely into this arena. And the game mechanics was the same, it's just the setting was different. And I offered the game to a lot of publishers, and nobody wanted it. And it probably meandered around for 2 years, and I just couldn't place it. And then Zoch decided to do the game, and of course it's their contribution also to say we change the theme, we make it less abstract, we put the chicken in there and the bloodworms, so they make it a little bit of a funny, gimmicky thing. And I think that has, a game consists of many different aspects, and I think that was an important aspect to add to it. And I have never expected that little game, particularly after all the rejections, would make such a big comeback and such a big impact for the gamers, for the casual gamers. And of course, today, a lot of publishers come to me and say, we're looking for a dice game. Why don't you have a dice game like Camino for us? We would have wanted this. And I said, you could have had it. I showed it to you then and then. Oh, so it's funny how sometimes things go.
So what do you attribute the success to?
It is hard to say. For the one reason, because I have a very critical opinion to marketing people. Marketing people always can explain the past, and they are very convinced that their explanation is right. But they never get the future right. So then I ask myself, why should the models for the past be right? When you know the result, you can give any reasoning, but you don't know if the reasoning is right. So I don't know. I think there is some excitement about how far do I push my luck with the dice. There's also the interaction that I can steal some bloodworms, so the scoring units from the other players. I think the theme and the nice chickens on there, so the whole setting is certainly adding to the success. The graphics, how it looks. So there's a lot of different elements. I think also from a more gamey point of view, I actually believe that Camino introduces a completely innovative way of how you play with games. With dice, how you play with dice. Because many other games have always this Yahtzee touch. You're going for something, you decide what you go for. I want lots of these, and you roll and roll until you get many of these. And this is not just in the standard Yahtzee, it's in many different situations. I go for the high numbers, I just roll for the highs. I go for many of those, I need many kills, whatever. And this is decide one category and go for many. In Camino, it's the other way around. You roll the dice and you decide upon one number on the die. And you choose all the dice which show this number and put it aside. And then you roll the dice again. And now you need to choose a different number and put all the dice aside. And so you have a completely different task, because when you roll a 5 in your first roll, would you take it? A 5 is a nice high number. But maybe when I roll again, I can get 2 or 3 5s, because if I choose 1 5, I cannot take 4. So maybe I only take, if I don't have many multiples of the high numbers, I only take 1, 2. It only lost me 1 die. And then I roll again. Okay, here they are, 3 5s. I will take them. And then the question is, I have already got, after the 2 and the 3 5, 17 points. But I've only got 4 dice left. I'm still fine, because I can roll and get a different numbers of what I have rolled so far. So I will do that, and then maybe I get 2 4s. I'm extremely happy, because now 8 to 17 is 25 points. I have 2 dice left. What do I do? Do I roll again to improve my result? I've still got 3 numbers available, but if none of the numbers shows, then my roll is lost. So what I'm saying is, I think you have a completely different and I think very innovative approach, a second gaming system next to Yahtzee, which is fundamentally offering you a different challenge in the dice games.
So since board games have got much more popular, of course, many people have aspired to design, and, every gamer's got this idea for a game in their head. What advice would you give to the aspiring game designer designing games today?
Firstly, don't do it for earning money. Secondly, know your market, know your games very well. So hopefully you have played thousands of different games and know which publishers do which games and what they prefer and what is on the market. And then I also say, don't be afraid that things get stolen off you. Show your things to publishers, and I suggest show them to small publishers, because the small publisher will always look much more after the individual game, and you have much more influence on the game, and you have much more learning opportunities because you have a much more intense and deeper contact to small publishers. If you go to the big publishers, you lose control. It's hard enough for established designers to have some control in these big processes, but you want to learn, you want to get published first. Don't look at, to summarize, don't look at the money. Just get something very nice out there. Know your games and make the perfect product, and then hopefully you'll find a publisher and get published. And once you have taken the first step, the next steps will become easier.
So you're an established name in the industry. I mean, one of the most famous game designers ever. To what degree do you have control over your design? Can you say to a publisher, no, I want this to stay in? Or do the publisher have complete control over things like theming and things like that?
As a designer, one has to accept that the publisher, firstly, is also competent. Otherwise, I shouldn't work with this publisher. And also that the publisher carries the major part of the financial risk. So they also need to have a big part in the say how they want to present their game. Of course, we have a licensing agreement. Of course, there are some approval rights of mine in there. But if it comes down to having to get out the contract and say, here, I'll show you something. You need to show me this and we can't do this. I think then you're already on the wrong footing. It is in my eyes, very fruitful cooperation between the designer and the publisher. If you are self-publishing, you don't have this second pair of eyes to look critically at it, and the publisher can contribute a lot of good things to your game. Of course, sometimes the ideas are not going the right direction, and sometimes some individuals feel I have to make my mark on this game. And there comes a point where you need to say, okay, I can go that far, but I cannot go on this side. And then it's less a situation, I don't let you do it. It's more a situation, if we can't agree, even though we have a licensing agreement, then let's not do it. Because it's not a win-lose situation. If you're not convinced we together can make a winning product where everybody stands behind it, let's not do it.
So your next game is one of your most beloved designs. It's Lost Cities. Why do you think this game is so popular?
This is the marketing explanation question again. It's interesting. One thing very much surprised me when we first published the game. And that was a lot of gamers told me, that's a nice spouse game. Gamers at that time, even more than today, were mostly male, and they had girlfriends, wives, and these were not as much into gaming. Very often they were not as much into gaming as the gamers themselves. But Lost Cities seemed to be a game which has this kind of female touch. I cannot explain what it is, but a lot of female players like it, a lot of pleasure players like it, and the gamers like it as well. So it was a natural bridge between the archetypical strong gamer's man and the wife, girlfriend, companion who was not so much into gaming, and they could bridge this and play this game. And I've heard this over and over again, and that may be one aspect why it just hit it with both sides, with the casual player side as well as with the gamer side.
So Lost Cities is a small box game, and often I'll go to game night and someone will say, oh, we've got 15 minutes, there's a little game we can play to fill in, and I'll look on the box and your name is on it. I remember once I played this tile laying game with sushi, something to do with that. And so how difficult is it to go from designing big games like Tigris and Euphrates, like Ra, and going down to small box games? And which do you prefer to design?
There is no preference. I strongly believe that you do not need complexity to enjoy games and to have fun with games. And a game needs to be as complex as necessary, but no more. It almost reminds me of an Einstein quote, which somewhat says, you should simplify a theory as far as possible, but no further. This is kind of the opposite, but I like the simplicity. Nobody likes to read long rules. I like to have a clear understanding. These are the rules, and I would then like to get the players involved so that the game essentially just becomes the platform on which the players can then interact. And the players, the other people in the game, are the always and ever new things that you will interact with. And when the opponent reacts differently, the game will be differently. So this is my approach to bring in more than the game, to bring in the people and have much more variety. And you can do that with very small games. You can get a lot of fun for people with small games. You put them on the table, you enjoy them, because you also need to see it only takes 15 minutes and you get a lot of value for this time. If you spend an hour, you need to offer more, but you also need to invest an hour. And it's just, as life is so big in variety, I think it's also for the playing. I don't think there are many people who say I only play 5-hour games or only play 15 minutes games. They will always have a range of what they play. And so I enjoy designing this range of games. It also helps me to stay fresh, because I don't want to become a specialist, being defined as knowing more and more about less and less, so going deeper until you know everything about nothing. But I want to stay relevant, and relevance means you need to always challenge yourself, look at new designs, look at new opportunities to present games, looking at new areas, how you can essentially arrive at people, can contact people, can get them to gaming. I mean, we talk about the whole mobile side and all the electronic elements which have changed our industry significantly. But it's always the challenge. I want to be as wide and as broad as I possibly can, because I think it will rejuvenate and fertilize all my designs.
So what's in the future for you? How many games do you have coming out in 2018, for instance?
I don't know how many games will come out in 2018, and it's also probably not clear, because some will be delayed and some will be coming out as planned. There may even be 1 or 2 not yet licensed, where the publishers are very quick and can bring them out. There are some electronic games in the pipeline which have sometimes a quicker time to market. And I'm not in a hurry. You see, I have lots of nice designs, I believe. And for me, it is more important to find a safe and suitable harbor, meaning a publisher for the game where I think they will do the game justice. And if it comes out this year or next year is quite irrelevant for me. Of course, I'm designing lots of things. I'm dealing with many publishers all over the world, and I want to have enough materials for them. But the drive is not so much I need to give them something. It's just the universe has so many games still to be invented, and I believe some of them are still reserved for me. And I'm sometimes panicking because there are other people, there are people who steal my ideas before I have them. And so it is, when I look at some games, I say, yes, that should have been my game. Yes. And so I think the universe tells me you also need to get on with it. Otherwise I'll give the game to somebody else. And that keeps me going. And that's very true. I really think there are so many things and so many ideas and so many new things one can do if I just found the time.
So how are you so prolific?
I think it's the sad story that I'm essentially focusing my entire game on designing games. I think, I believe, praising myself for a second, what I do well is combine both aspects, the mad, relaxed design, free from all restrictions, and then this combined with a good business sense and being organized to also get these games finished and get them to market.
So your last game is El Dorado, and this was the game that was nominated for the Spiel des Jahres last year. What was the inspiration for this?
I have the ambition that I want to create new things, create new trends, and I'm always put off a little bit if I should follow a trend. Unfortunately, I have not designed deck building games. And this is actually one which is not 100% my type of game originally. So I didn't think that this idea was stolen from me. This was somebody else's idea. So the universe had this for somebody else. And initially, I actually had quite some difficulties getting into this type of game. I felt lost in there. I can very well remember when I played Dominion for the first time, which is the starting point of these types of games. And it didn't speak to me. And I said, why do I feel so lost? And I left it for a while, and then it became more successful. And so when I finally said, I want to look at this in more detail to understand why it is so much loved by many players, I then said, okay, I think I can do something new. I think I can make it more transparent, more accessible what you do. And that's how we then introduced the board, the kind of race track, the expedition track, because building an abstract engine, for those people who know what deck building games are, having the cards, improving the cards, playing through your deck over and over again, it is an abstract engine in the end, and you need to understand all the models. For mathematics-oriented people, probably easier, but I wanted to make it much more clear and intuitive what you do. And so this expedition track makes it quite clear. So, okay, I have cards where I can go to the jungle. And then there comes a river. How do I cross the river? Well, there are river cards. I need to get a boat. So very clearly, I need to get boat cards into my deck. And then comes a desert. Well, maybe I make sure that I can cross the desert. And then there isn't a jungle coming anymore. So why do I still carry the jungle cards with me? And so it becomes very natural why I build my system, because I have the overriding principle very, very thematic and very transparent. I want to get to the other end of the expedition. What do I need to do? Which tools do I need? And then I think it becomes natural that I build my deck. And then if you put that in front of people, I've experienced over and over again, there's no obstacle, no hurdle to take. Yes, I understand that. Yes, I need these cards. How do I get these cards? Yes, I want to move. Oh, I'm blocked. How do I do this? What do I do now? Oh, put myself in a corner. Next time I know better.
And so this game, as I said, was nominated for Spiel des Jahres. How important are awards to you, and how disappointed were you that you didn't win last year?
I think awards are very important for the public and the culture of games, because we have a lot of novelties out there, and awards give orientation, and also awards get picked up in the press, and they make the games, the culture of games, more visible. This is important because our games are competing with particularly the free time, but also the free available money for people, and they could go to sport events, they could just sit in front of the television or go to cinemas, they could travel, they do sports, and we are in competition. And the more we can further the culture of games and show what fascinating aspects and time games can offer, the better. And therefore, these awards are very important. The awards can also be important for the publisher and the designer from a commercial point of view. But I think it is of ultimate importance for you as a designer, for me as a designer, for everybody, that you do not base your happiness on awards. And you do not bend yourself towards winning awards. You just end up with a bent game and you don't win the awards either. So you need to know your happiness while you do things. And I believe it needs to be intrinsic. And if you have an intrinsic happiness about doing what you're doing, it doesn't matter if you win an award or not. Of course, it's nice to win an award. It's a nice recognition. But it's also an award to get published. It's also an award to earn some money with it. It's also an award, for me, even a greater award, if lots of people play it, because what do I want to do as a designer? I want to bring enjoyment to the people, to the players. That's the biggest reward I can get. And as long as I can make enough money not to starve, and this I do, then what counts is really to do great games and bring them out to the people. Awards help, but if you make yourself dependent or get too much emotionally involved, I could win it, and what does it mean for you? You will be more often disappointed than you will be cheering, and you cannot influence it. So why spend energy on it? I work on that and say I will not get emotionally involved in it. It happens. I can't do anything. Where I can do something is when I design games.
And that's where I want to be as much undistracted as possible, be my best and do the best games.
So one more question. You're speeding down the road away from the apocalypse and you turn a corner and the back door of the car flies open and 4 of your games fly out down a ravine and are swept away by the river. Which game do you hope is still sitting in the back seat?
I think you and probably all the people who listen know it already. It's a pack of cards.
Excellent. So if people want to contact you and see what you're up to, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, I need to ask a little bit for understanding that I am trying to hide myself away a bit from the world, because I know a lot of people would like to chat with me and would like to ask questions and so on. I'm only one guy. I cannot clone myself. And if I get engaged in lots of these things, as much as I want to do them, it keeps me away from doing what I need to do and what people expect from me to do, and that is design good games. So I'm hiding a little bit away. Of course, we have a website. There is information on there, and we put tweets out. So you see that all on our website, which is just under my name. And when I go out onto fairs, then I'm open. Then I can meet people. Then I want to get the feedback there. Then I'm available. Then I'm open. Then I'm not designing. But it is as much as I can say also, I need to focus what I do best. And what I do best is design games. And that's what I want to get as much time as I can.
Fabulous. So, Reiner Knizia, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very interesting and exciting conversation. And I hope that a lot of your listeners will enjoy it and will enjoy not only the interview, but also the many games which the world and the universe presents to us. Enjoy life, enjoy the games.
And if you want to suggest a guest, or if you want to say something nice about the show, or if you want to say something horrible about the show, you can contact me on @5gamesfordoomsday on Twitter, or you can send me an email at 5gamesfordoomsday@gmail.com. You can support the show at patreon.com/5G4D. And if I haven't had to hot-foot it to my cabin au bois to escape the bouncing termites and the piles of malevolent blancmange, I'll see you in 2 weeks for another 5 Games for Doomsday.